Hi guys. So this is your faculty Ranganathan SVN Kondala, back again with the continuation of the Indian architecture series of videos that we were doing in the last class, in the last video. Now, in the previous video, I've given you an introduction about what Indian architecture is all about, what are the different features. Then I've discussed a little about Bhim Bhetka, and then I've given you the differences of architecture and sculpture. What do they basically mean? What are the similarities? What are the differences between them? And now let us continue the discussion to the next part. That is, we will see certain architectural features of Indus Valley civilization. Now, as I've previously told, see, architecture in India begins with Indus Valley civilization. Just as history of India begins with Indus Valley civilization, Indian architecture also begins with Indus Valley civilization. Now, Indus Valley civilization is basically a civilizational style or civilizational living extending all the way from 3300 BC to approximately 1750 BC, and largely in the area that we today call Northwest India, and also areas of Pakistan and some part of Afghanistan. Now, largely in Northwest India, some part of what we today call Pakistan, what we call Northwest India, all these regions put together are known as Indus Valley civilization. Now, the excavations of Indus Valley civilization began in 1920s under Dr. Dayaram Sahani, and eventually Rakhaldas Banerjee continued that, and from there the excavation story continued. There is no stoppage in this. Most archaeologists, most historians are even today astonished at the levels of perfection and levels of, you can say, architectural excellence the Indus Valley civilization has actually left us. Even today, they remain a mystery. Many of the architectural features we see in the 19th century to 21st century India have been existing from Indus Valley civilization. In a way, some historians are even right to the extent of saying that modern day architecture is nothing but a continual extension of the Indus Valley architecture. The society of Indus Valley civilization existed all the way from 3300 BC to 1700 BC, approximately 13 lakh square kilometers. So there are three types of buildings: public buildings, private buildings, housing complexes. The housing complexes are generally row houses. Now, apart from this, one common feature, one unique feature that we observe in the entire Indus Valley architectural style is two-part city. Indus Valley cities are actually divided into two parts. In general, Indus cities, the western side is always a high mound. It is on a little high platform, and we call this a citadel. The eastern part, low city. Western high mound, eastern low mound. In the west, large buildings, palaces type constructions, or even granaries. Granaries are those places where grains are actually stored, probably for emergency purposes, probably for whenever there is a special requirement or emergency requirement. They used to have these granaries. These granaries were constructed on the western high mound. Given that western high mound is on a high platform, there will be a lot of wind. So these granaries also used to have air ducts. So people of Indus Valley civilization also had extensive knowledge of storage, of geography, of climate, of agriculture, everything. Because if you store grains in closed rooms, you will always find mold in those grains. Indus Valley people avoided that by building granaries on the western high platform. The lower city used to have smaller one-room constructions. I mean, you see this completely probably mainly for the working class people. Mainly for the working class, lower, high cities. And in the entire city, all Indus Valley cities, we see, and on an average, if you observe, a very advanced drainage system, well planned. Every house seems to have been connected to these drain canals. So, if you observe, since I said east mein this low platform, west high mount, in general, all cities of Indus Valley are in cardinal directions. What is cardinal? East, west, north, south, perfect direction. Enter the city in the east, go to the west. West is high platform, north and south. And generally, cities were also fortified. They also have the practice of fortification. In general, there are some cities which are not fortified. Upper portion of all the cities were fortified, while the remaining parts of the cities tend to have less fortification, or if sometimes they are really devoid of forts. Probably lower cities were meant for the masses, and upper cities, the high platform, the upper cities were definitely meant for the ruling classes. I mean, that should have been the only reason why they have a two-part city. Okay, now this is an example of the citadel structure on the upper platform. Now you can see how the brick style is, how the drain canals are. Perfect. This is an example of the Mohenjo-daro's upper city. Now, in Harappa, or in the entire civilization, we also observe one thing. Based on their architecture, we can deduce that Indus Valley civilization did not appear suddenly. I mean, it did not just come suddenly. It seems to have been developed over a period of time. In fact, Mohenjo-daro shows evidence of 7 layers. That is, it might have been reconstructed 6 times. Kot Diji seems to be one of the earliest cities. Most of these urban features that I told you, drainage patterns and cardinal direction constructions and 90-degree cuts, etc., these are missing in Kot Diji. The basic idea of grid pattern in cardinal direction, north-south direction, east entrance, west citadel, or the high platform, that existed. Every city, almost every city seems to have had walled enclosures. Walled enclosures is even within the city. There seems to be some parts which had smaller rooms, some parts which seems to have had large houses. The housing structure also was sort of divided based on the city to city. In Mohenjo-daro, Western High Mount is definitely much higher than that in other cities. The walls of the houses have several layers, I mean, under them, probably because they've been reconstructed. One best evidence of why we call this to be consistent reconstructions due to flooding. Flooding seems to have been very common trouble here. Harappa. In Harappa, the mounds are surrounded by massive mud walls with large brick gateways. Walls seems to be definitely for defensive purposes. I mean, in Harappa at least, all the walls were for defensive purposes. Defensive in the sense is defensive from the flooding part. Because see, in Harappan architecture, Harappan sculptures also, we do not see any evidence of war infrastructure, tools, weapons, metals. We sort of see a direct absence of it. And most of the construction material in Harappa varied from strata of the society. I mean, higher echelons of the society, probably in the citadels, the high mounts, there seems to be fine finished bricks, fine finished mud bricks, baked bricks. Lower cities, burnt bricks, wood, reed seems to have been used. So construction material definitely varied on the basis of strata of the society. Mud bricks, burnt bricks, wood and reed differ from region to region. And one standard thing that we observe is the brick size in Harappa was 1:2:4. Some books will even call it 4:2:1. Length is to breadth is to height was exactly proportional. This is even today the dimension that we use in modern brick structures. Present day modern brick structures are also 4:2:1. We still use the same. And general material in Harappa that we observe is burnt bricks. Well, general material is burnt bricks. Okay. Some books will also call it baked bricks. Continuing with the way we were discussing yesterday in the last class, in the last video. I was giving a quick overview of where the Indus Valley's architecture structures were. Now, when we see the housing styles in Indus Valley civilization, most of the doors and windows of Indus Valley civilization were actually made of wood. I mean, this was basically the typical standard wooden structures. Just like how we have the wooden frames, like this, where the door frame, the door comes like this. It is exactly the same. Nothing has changed in Indus Valley civilization from the past. It is pretty much exactly how it was. The door frames. Okay. Now, in when we see the housing, one feature that we observe in housing in Indus Valley civilization in architectural pattern is the central open courtyard. In all the houses, the mid of the house was open. It has an open roof. This is a typical structure that you see even today in most of old typical classical village houses of India. Sometimes the houses did have first floor or second floor, and the roof was supported by wooden beams. And wherever there was water, like in bathrooms, like in kitchens, like area around the well, on bath areas, there were very well off planned drains and baked bricks and tiles. Tiles were basically red clay baked tiles. Red clay baked tiles. So the typical house structure had a central open courtyard, wooden beam roofs supporting. Okay, and Indus Valley housing structures also show very clear evidence of wooden staircase. So that's why architecturally most of the historians do believe that along with baked bricks, wood seems to be the second most important architectural material which was used. Some of the recent excavations of Indus Valley civilization has given us some interesting insights into the way Indus Valley architecture designed. The street light system of Indus Valley existed. I mean, in Mohenjo-daro, on the either sides of the road, there seems to have been large pillars which had a sort of poles. These may be poles which are similar to modern day street lights. And street lights arrangements were also done suitably fit for the nights. Watch and ward arrangement was also there in the night. Basically, there were these guard tower types. Those also seem to have been existed. So consistently, Indus Valley architecture was very accommodative and very supportive, or very comfortably designed to fit their urban planning systems. And there were specific places across the Indus Valley cities to throw rubbish, waste materials. They also had well-designed public wells. In pretty much every street, probably for water drawing sources. And also well in every house. So every house had a water well for their private use. For public use, there was regular wells. I mean, all these patterns clearly reveals a well established high sense of engineering and town planning among the people of Indus Valley. The main streets of Indus Valley civilization were approximately 30 to 34 feet wide and they've been laid out, as I've discussed in one of the early videos, 90-degree cuts, right angles, well planned, with great skill, dividing the cities into blocks as well. I mean, there were blocks, and there were some areas where the houses were big houses, there were some areas where the houses were small houses, there were some areas where the houses were small houses, there were some areas where the houses were big houses, and they had well planned network of very narrow lanes. Indus Valley streets were also quite broad, 9 feet at times, going up until 34 feet. 9 feet to 34 feet. The corners of the street rounded off, perhaps mainly to enable heavy carts to take turns. I mean, I'll give an example. You know how if this is the street, these corners were rounded off like this. The corners were actually rounded off like this, so that probably they might have had very heavy carts to move, and to enable the movement of these heavy carts, they had these rounded off streets. This is a typical example planning of a grid structure, and also the block planning. Block structure, grid structure of the Indus Valley civilization. And again, all streets of Indus Valley intersected only at right angles, in a way that prevailing winds could work as a sort of suction pump. I mean, even the street planning was done in such a way that it would create a regular ventilative system within the city structure. No buildings were allowed to be constructed arbitrarily, so everything was planned only. Because of this planned limitation of all the village structures or all the city structures, there is a theory which is given by many historians that Indus Valley probably had a sort of municipal government, a sort of municipal structure. Okay, that somebody was designing and deciding the rules, and everybody was allowing to it. The owners of pottery kilns were not allowed to build their furnaces within the town, obviously to save the town from air pollution. I mean, so that planning was also there. So those who were involved in pottery, their kilns were kept outside. Brick kilns were kept outside. Drainage system seems to have been well planned and well managed actually. At every regular intervals, there were 6 feet drain pits, which probably was used for cleaning and maintenance. And this is similar to, you know how we have the drain holes today? Very similar to that. The idea of drain system, drainage canals, drain cleaning was highly scientific. It had focus on 2 things: hygiene and planning. 2 things seems to have been very evident in Indus Valley drainage system. The drainage systems of Mohenjo-daro were so elaborate, so scientifically similar to the modern advanced drain systems of today, that it looks as if that modern drain structures and modern architecture learnt a lot from the Indus Valley people. The drain systems of Mohenjo-daro were very, very elaborate. House drains, every house was also connected to the main drain canal under the main streets, and generally mainly below the main road. The drains were also, the way it was done is drains were cut into canals, and these canals were then layered with gypsum, limestone and cement, so that to avoid water damage. This is something we do even today. In regular intervals, there were inspection traps and manholes. Generally, the main drain was 2.5 feet and 5 feet broad. 5 feet broad, 2.5 feet deep. Again, perfection. The small drains were connected to the main drains with the help of pull water, speedily out of the town. The way it was done is the drains were kept under the road. So they used the gravity pattern. So this was the main drain, this was the road. Houses were generally a little on the tall. They used gravity systems to mainly bring the drain water down. House drains connected to the main drains running the streams. See, this is also So this is the house. House is a little tall. So from here, like this, you see, there is a canal here. The canal would come flow like this, and it will fill into this, and this entire thing will eventually go and fill into the main drain. House drains connected to the main drains running under the main streets and below main lanes. Drains were made with gypsum, 2.5 feet by 5 feet. Smaller drains were connected with main drains, and every house had its own independent soaking pit also, like a septic tank of modern day today, which collected the sediments and allowed water to flow to the main drain. So only water was allowed into the flow into the main drain. Again, probably they had a modern day problem like clogging. So to avoid clogging, this was also well established. Perfect care was taken to ensure that housewives did not throw refuse and dirt into the drains. Extensive drainage system adopted by the people of Indus Valley proves their very heavy or very important sense of health and sanitation. So when we see the house planning structures, Indus Valley house planning structure, that's why seems to be a very strong inspiration for modern day house structures and modern day architecture. And modern day house architecture seems to have learned a lot from Indus Valley civilization. So that's it in this video here from Indian architecture on Unacademy. So let us continue discussion on the Indian architecture styles, patterns in the next video. This is your faculty Ranganathan SVN Kondala signing off. Do subscribe to Unacademy Plus. You can follow me on unacademy.com/@Shrivenar, SRIVENR. See you guys. I'll see you in the next class, next video. Bye bye.